Well, the UK may have formally left the European Union 11 months ago at the end of January, but the real change will happen in the next few minutes when the clock strikes midnight in Brussels and 2021 comes in across most of Europe. That's when the Brexit transition comes to an end and the UK leaves the single market and the customs union, thereby also ending freedom of movement. Of course, without the deal approved in Parliament yesterday, the change would have been even greater. But even so, what will happen at 11 p.m. UK time represents the biggest change to Britain's relationship with Europe since 1973. Well, as we build up to that moment, we'll speak shortly to our correspondents across the country. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is in Downing Street. Our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, is in Belfast. Our reporter, Hanisha Sethi, is in Dover. And in Edinburgh, we have our Scotland correspondent, James Matthews. But first, as the final minutes tick away, let's discuss Brexit from both sides of the fence. In North London, we're joined by Baroness Fox, founder and director of the Institute of Ideas. She also served as a Brexit Party MEP in the European Parliament. And in South East London, we have Polly Mackenzie, director of the Demos think tank and an advisor to the former Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg when he was Deputy Prime Minister. Welcome to both of you. Claire, then to you, a seismic, perhaps a moment of excitement for someone like you when Brexit really takes shape.
Yeah, I mean, I remember 2 years ago, I think I was on with you doing the paper review, Anna, and I said it's all over. They've won. I was depressed. It seemed to me that the Remain alliance had thwarted what people had voted for. And it was shortly after that that I made the decision to change my life, to stand as a Brexit Party candidate. And, I think that changed things for people, not just for me, but for all of the people who stood. We then changed everything because the Brexit Party won that election. The MEPs, who were a fantastic band of people from all sides politically, were able to make a mark. But the most important thing that happened was that the voters never gave up. Time and again, they voted to say, we meant it in 2016, we never changed our mind. So for me, it's a relief. This deal is not brilliant, but it's a relief and it's a great day for democracy.
Polly, is this a case, do you think, of into the Brexit unknown? Really, it's only after weeks or perhaps even months that we'll really know what this means for the UK.
I think it's a really sad and solemn day. We absolutely are stepping into the unknown. What's remarkable about this agreement is how much of it is an agreement to discuss things, a disagreement to have committees, to negotiate in perpetuity, really. And not surprisingly, given that this is a continent with which we have our strongest trading relationships. I think, we have had the freedom of this continent as an extraordinary privilege as British people for the last 30-something, 50, have lost track. Too many years, more years than I've been alive. And I think at a moment like this, it's important that we all make space for each other's emotions. I don't really understand Claire's joy, but I absolutely respect her feelings, and I want her to feel that great joy. But I think it's also important that Brexiteers allow those of us who feel the other way to have some time for our grief and the solemnity of that loss of freedom, which we feel very profoundly.
Claire, will you miss any bits?
Listen, we haven't left Europe. We haven't left the continent of Europe. I consider myself to be a great enthusiast for European culture, European society, and I have many friends and colleagues throughout Europe who, by the way, are not fans of the bureaucratic imposition of the EU. But Polly's right, it's not a question of, I don't want to have a go at people who voted Remain. Most of the people I know who voted Remain accepted this decision a long time ago. They got over their grief quickly in 2016. Some people didn't because it dragged on, and it dragged on because lots of people in the establishment just said, well, we know you voted to leave, but you're not going to. We're going to stop it. But now, of course, I want it to go beyond Remainer or Leaver. I want it to be a democratic moment of renewal. But I don't want people to imagine that this is a sad moment. Polly's absolutely right. The deal's got loads of pitfalls in it. I pored over it, let me tell you, because now I have to legislate. I have to take that detail seriously. And the people in the fishing communities and the coastal communities, and my colleague June Mummery, who's fought so hard for them, just as an example, are bitterly disappointed with this deal in many ways. I'd prefer to have walked away. But The point is, it was about shaking up the status quo, and it was about honouring that democratic vote and having more direct democracy, as your paper reviewer said. And now no British politician will ever be able to blame the EU for anything. They have to look us straight in the eye and take responsibility for every law that's made here. And that's positive. That's a good thing. And change is scary, but it can be positive and good. I'm scared by COVID holding back those freedoms, but that's a different question.
Just very quickly, Polly, to you, all of that, what does it mean for me stuff? It's kind of irrelevant right now, isn't it? Because of COVID, we're not travelling into Europe or anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the real thing preventing us from travelling into France is travel restrictions holding us all back. And we don't know how this is going to unfold, but we do know that economic recovery is going to be hard to fight for in the coming year and vitally important. And, you know, to have the headwind of Brexit and these new trade restrictions does seem unfortunate. And yet we have to make the best of it.
Claire and Polly, we will speak to you more, but let's just show you the scene as Big Ben ticks over to 11 p.m. The words from the French president tonight that Britain will remain a close ally of France after it finalises its divorce from the European Union. The United Kingdom remains our neighbour and also our friend and ally, he said in his New Year's Eve address to the nation. Britain, of course, exiting the European Union's orbit at 2300 GMT, midnight in Brussels, after a 48-year-long tempestuous relationship, some might say, leading, of course, to that 2016 referendum and years of debate afterwards. Big Ben has just hit 11 o'clock, which means the UK has officially ended its political relationship with the European Union. It is a moment which could have been markedly different had a last-minute trade deal not been approved in Parliament last night. And although Brexit officially happened 11 months ago, it is from now the end of the Brexit transition period when the UK will leave the single market and the customs union, and freedom of movement will end. It is the biggest change to Britain's relationship with Europe since 1973. Well, we'll be talking through what it will mean for the UK to Sky's deputy political editor Sam Coates, who is in Downing Street. Our senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins is in Belfast. Our reporter Hanisha Sethi is in Dover. And from Edinburgh, our Scotland correspondent James Matthews will be reporting. But Sam, let's go to you first of all. What is the significance then of tonight, and what does the future relationship look like?
Well, one of the most striking things about here in Downing Street is the silence. When Britain formally left the European Union on the 31st of January of this year, this street was a party. There was a countdown clock on the wall behind me. The Prime Minister bonged a gong. There was a party over in Parliament Square, and there was a vibrancy to the moment. Tonight there is one solitary light in the Prime Minister's flat. They've even turned out the Christmas tree lights behind me. This is a curious moment. Of course it's not a moment for celebration. We are in a national emergency because of coronavirus. But it's also, I suspect, a moment of trepidation. Boris Johnson talks of a beginning. We've just cut ties with the economic bloc that we have been part of since the 1st of January 1973, when Britain joined the European Economic Community. We have, in the form of a 1,246-page treaty, a blueprint for how things are going to work, but nobody really knows what that's going to look like in practice, how businesses are going to adapt, how lawyers are going to interpret it, how politicians are going to use that agreement in the future. There's a lot that we don't know. There are small things that we do. We know that we've taken back control of migration, so we'll be able to stop European citizens from coming to live in the UK if we don't accept their application. We can change our tax rates, which we were locked into before, like VAT on sanitary products, which the UK government will get rid of. We'll keep some things the same. Tonight, Grant Shapps announced that we will be able to use our driving licences when going to the continent. But the destination of the United Kingdom is uncertain. So much will change. Some people won't have realised yet the scale of the change that we are about to undertake. And it won't really become clear until that extraordinary agreement is put into practice. That moment begins now, but we don't know what it'll mean, which is why tonight, silence, perhaps some nerves. The celebrations were back in January.
And David Blevins, so much of the debate has been about Northern Ireland, which shares, of course, a land border with the European Union. Is the resolution to that question OK for the people there?
I think it is a matter that will continue to cause debate for a long time to come. Anna, welcome to the Port of Belfast, and I could say welcome back to the EU's single market, because politically the UK may have left the European Union, but in a practical sense it is Great Britain that has left the European Union. Northern Ireland alone remains in the EU's single market for goods, enforcing its customs regulations at its ports. That's because the EU and UK concluded that the only way to prevent a return to a visible border on this island between Northern Ireland and the Republic was to establish an economic border in the Irish Sea between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And that is what has come into effect in the last few minutes. To put that into context for you, back in February 2018, then Prime Minister Theresa May said no British Prime Minister could ever accept a border in the Irish Sea. In November 2018, Boris Johnson told the DUP conference here in Belfast that no British Conservative government could or should sign up to any such arrangement. So it's hardly surprising that many unionists are very nervous about the direction of travel now constitutionally. Some of them are describing this as the most significant constitutional development since this island was partitioned 100 years ago, and it's not how they wanted to be marking the centenary of Northern Ireland. I think it's worth pointing out also that Northern Ireland now finds itself in a situation where some are describing it as having the best of both worlds, with access to both the EU market and to the GB market. But unionists are unable to sell that in many ways, because to do so would be to highlight that Northern Ireland is being treated differently to the rest of the UK. And equally, nationalists are arguably unable to sell it, because if they were to sell it, they are talking themselves away from a united Ireland in some sense. So despite all of the political and economic argument that's going to continue for some time, it is clear that Northern Ireland really is still a place apart.
David, thank you. Well, Anisha Sethi, Dover had a taste of the chaos which could have ensued should there not have been a trade deal. But nonetheless, what is happening there tonight, and what is the port and hauliers expecting?
Well, the situation here in Dover is quiet, it's calm. It's nothing like the chaotic scenes that we saw just a few days ago when lorries were on total gridlock on the roads of Kent. But behind me all day and all evening, patrol officers have been checking documents from drivers, including negative COVID tests, which is what drivers need to show before they access the crossing. But as the new trading relationship with Europe begins, we can see representation of that here in Dover. New border operations will be in place, so heavy goods vehicles will need permits to take their goods from Britain through to the EU. And we understand that around 450 Kent access permits have been issued with their validity date of the 1st of January. And these will be detected by special cameras that will detect the number plates. But hauliers arriving without these permits, well, they'll be issued fines of up to £300. But this in turn could cause delays. And that's why the Road Haulage Association are expecting a few teething problems here. And because of this, some firms as well have said that they're concerned, saying that they're holding off goods at the moment because of fears of congestion that might happen tomorrow. But the success of this really depends on traders and businesses successfully completing their customs declarations here. But the government spokesperson, well, they've said that the border systems we need are in place, that the UK is ready for its new start. But this message from the government is expecting New Year's Day to be very quiet here in Dover.
Indeed so. Well, James Matthews, for the majority of Scots, this is perhaps not a moment to savour, and one which could have big political consequences.
Yeah, I think it will, Anna. You know, the SNP have been talking today about Brussels leaving a light on for Scotland with a view to returning to the EU as an independent nation, as they would have it. I think they are lighting the touch paper for their own Scottish Parliament campaign come May. There are Scottish parliamentary elections in May, and Brexit will be threaded through that. The SNP selling this message of injustice, a democratic affront. That's how they would see Brexit in a country that voted 62% to remain in the EU. The majority of Scots wanted to stay in. And for that majority, the past few weeks, the whole denouement of Brexit has been a tough watch, frankly. Much, of course, will depend on how Brexit plays out. But those charged with nurturing the union through those Scottish Parliament elections, and perhaps, just perhaps, an India Ref2 beyond that, they need a strong hand to play with, a stronger hand than Brexit has delivered them so far. And I think it's important to bear in mind, Anna, that should we ever get to India Ref2, and there are considerable obstacles in the way of that, it won't be a rerun of 2014. The rules of engagement will have changed considerably, because first time round in 2014, people who voted to stay in the UK were voting to stay in a UK that was inside the EU. They were voting for life as it was and all the security and familiarity that that carried with it. Things would be different next time round if, and it is a big if, but if India Ref2 does come.
Well, James, along with Sam, David and Tanisha, thanks to all of you. Well, if there's one thing we've learned since the EU referendum 4.5 years ago, it's that business doesn't like uncertainty. Finally, last week, just days before the end of the transition period, the agreement of a trade deal made things that little bit less uncertain. But life outside the EU will still bring momentous changes, as our business correspondent Helen Smith looks now at just how prepared UK firms are.
The sun belly up over Birmingham wholesale market, and hundreds of crates of goods have already passed in and out. Traders here rely on a near constant flow of lorries. For some, up to 80% of supply comes from the EU. For all, tomorrow means new procedures and potentially problems. The pandemic's already left businesses like Peter's up to 40% down.
There's going to be an impact, as in there's going to be a cost involved, and obviously that, unfortunately, that cost is going to be handed on to the consumer, because obviously with the extra paperwork and the extra time at the ports. I did vote for Brexit, but I think if I had my time again, I don't know.
Oh, really? As serious as that?
Yeah.
Because of the impact on your business?
Because of the impact, yeah.
But there's optimism here too. Stephen's a fifth-generation fish trader and says any problems are small fry.
Short term, there may be a couple of weeks where suppliers are maybe just a little bit nervous, but long term, I'm very optimistic. I believe it's a huge opportunity for this country as a whole. I really do.
Many traders here have been in this business for decades, but few were even of working age when Britain first joined the common market back in the early 70s. For better or for worse, whether welcomed or feared, January the 1st heralds an entirely new era for British business. Although most goods won't face new tariffs or quotas, there will be customs checks on anything crossing between the EU and the UK. Some goods, including some UK animal food products, will have to comply with new rules and restrictions. Hauliers will need new Kent access permits to enter the county, and some automatic workers' rights will be curtailed. It's all likely to cost time and money. Lorries moved smoothly through Dover today, but many fear the mass queues seen in December. Essex-based haulage firm Young's are so concerned they're temporarily halting all European services.
The dangers of being involved in long delays and receiving no revenue for those long days is actually, or would actually, cost more money. It is a gamble on our part. We might have an awful lot of egg all over our face come next week, but I suspect not. I think it's going to be a very, very challenging week next week.
Many others must also meet a whole new set of standards to sell to the EU. Renee's small business makes science kits for children. She estimates new safety certifications alone will cost her £20,000.
I'm really worried that there's going to come a point where cash flow is going to become a real issue. I might not be able to afford to pay my team. And the stress and the mental load of that is by far outweighs anything else. So I'm really worried about the impact, the financial impact, the real tangible financial impact. This is not posturing about the impact of Brexit and the possibilities. This is about right now, small businesses really struggling to be able to keep going financially.
Yep, 120 done. Okay.
Brexiteers have promised a new era of opportunity for business. Adjusting to it may not be without its casualties. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News, Birmingham.
Well, let's go back now to Baroness Claire Fox, founder and director of the Institute of Ideas and former MEP, and Polly Mackenzie, director of the Demos think tank, former advisor to the Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg when he was Deputy Prime Minister. Welcome back to both of you. Claire, it's fascinating this, isn't it? What would you say to those people who did not vote for Brexit? How would you sell your excitement at this moment?
Excitement? I mean, watching this item, I feel like it's the most depressing thing I've ever seen. It deployed a funereal tone throughout. This is a moment at which you could at least give credit to people that after 4.5 years of being traduced, called racist, xenophobe, stupid, didn't know what they were voting for, that this could never happen, that at last it has happened. And instead, the whole item has been how awful it is. So when you say that I should have to persuade people of why Brexit is a good thing, the thing is, we had a referendum, we voted for it. We're going to do it. We have to make the best of it. There will be hiccups along the way. People will say it's disruptive, but people didn't want the status quo. The status quo was not good enough for millions and millions of people. They wanted change. And I think there could be some grace given here, and we could celebrate a little bit, just give them a bit of credit for once, instead of it all being doom and gloom. I understand the problems in Northern Ireland. I've been going on about it for the last few days. The Northern Irish problem is going to be an issue in terms of the protocol. There are going to be problems in Scotland, but my God, can't we just have a bit of joy? It's a new era, new year. Come on, everyone.
Do you know, Claire, it's easy to remember January the 31st this year, just about, the massive party in Trafalgar Square, that sense of celebration. It's quite hard to replicate that, given the pandemic, to be honest with you.
No, it is, but it's just that when Sam Coates introduced it, he said it's all very quiet here and sombre, and that set a sort of tone for the evening. Now, we're all sombre because of coronavirus, but there's no need to be sombre because of Brexit. And I'm getting inundated with loads of thousands of people saying, congratulations, we did it. Can you believe it? The little people won. The establishment never stopped us. You know, we're not allowed to party. But all I'm saying is the mood on this programme might recognise that for millions of people, this is the equivalent of, you know, winning against the giant, if you want. And I know that Polly is right. You know, I don't want to... for me, it's not about having a go at Remainers, but it is about saying this is a big change. Ordinary people made history against all the odds. That is surely something that all Democrats can celebrate. Great.
Polly?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. The question is, what are they going to get for that change? It's certain that change is coming. One of my great fears is that people will get more of what they voted for less of, which is more globalization, more kind of freewheeling, libertarian, capitalism gone crazy. You know, none of the levelling up won't work. That all that this Brexit thus far we're hearing about in terms of consequences is forms to fill out, gunboats in the Thames to make sure we're stealing our fish. You know, what it is, of course, it's not the apocalypse. And there's plenty too many Remainers who have this loopy idea that somehow the world's going to come to an end. We are now, however many minutes it is in, the world has not come to an end. And yet, there are consequences, and I think it is entirely reasonable for Sky News, for everybody to be talking and trying to think those through so that we can plan our way of how we respond, rather than just saying, oh, let's be cheerful. Be cheerful about what specifically? It's a very backwards-looking thing to say people got changed. And yes, I can celebrate that. But what is the change that is going to actively benefit their lives? And at the moment, it's really, really slim pickings.
Can I come back?
You can.
Just for a little. I was asked to come on for the moment that we went into Brexit, and a bit like, New Year's Eve at midnight, I understand that at midnight, when we move into 2021, that the media might say, well, let's celebrate the start of a new year. Let's get doom and gloom about how awful everything's going to be. I'm all for analysis. I run the Academy of Ideas, and that's fine. I'm just making the point that there are positives about the democratic moments. And the main thing that, Polly, you haven't mentioned is that now lawmaking has been brought home, and that's a democratic gain. As Tony Benn explained, one of the problems with being in the EU, a global, transnational institution, was that the lawmakers were somewhere else in many instances. So that means that democracy is closer to people. When you say, what would you gain? It's not a GDP game. It's about saying, right, now we can actually make some decisions for ourselves and hold our politicians to account. That's all it is. And you might say that's nothing. For me, that's the greatest gain, Democratic renewal is a wonderful thing. And so it doesn't mean or guarantee good things, but it's the possibility of those things. We become more in control of our destiny. That's a good, positive thing.
Well, Baroness Claire Fox and Polly Mackenzie, great to have you both on. Claire, obviously, you can go and celebrate this moment and New Year's Eve very shortly. Thank you both very much.
A glass of Portuguese wine in
there we are. It's not the bubbles. That's got the wrong terminology now, isn't it? Being in a bubble. Great to see you both. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. Let's get a final thought then, shall we? Back to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who is in Downing Street for us this evening. You heard Baroness Claire Fox there. Sam, this is a moment to celebrate. The little people won. It certainly marks the end of the UK's political relationship with the EU. And just reflect for us, if you can, how we got here.
This is the apex of a journey not that has lasted 4.5 years since the referendum, but in some senses has lasted 30 years. Treaties to do with Maastricht in the 1990s and Lisbon in the early 2000s brought, in the eyes of many Brexiteers and Eurosceptics, Britain too close to the European Union, too locked into a political project that the UK didn't want to be part of. It was David Cameron, who became Tory leader in 2005, who began tentatively the process of detachment, promising right at the outset of his premiership, even before he became Prime Minister, that he would renegotiate with Europe to hand back to them, or to return to the UK powers to work out how we would govern ourselves when it came to labour laws and what's known as the social chapter. That promise couldn't be fulfilled while we remained inside the European Union, and that promise, let down to his own side, culminated in the referendum in 2016, which he lost. Britain voted to exit the European Union in order to take back those powers. It's cost two Prime Ministers, Theresa May and David Cameron first, Theresa May second, and now Boris Johnson has been able to push through Brexit and the model of Brexit that probably takes us as far from the European Union as possible. It remains to be seen, however, what we do with those freedoms in the years to come and how we capitalise on the lot that we now have.
Sam Coates live there for us in Downing Street. Many thank you for that. So there we have it. After months of thorny negotiations, the UK and European Union have finally ended their political relationship. A moment to savour, as we heard there from that former MEP, Baroness Claire Fox. The deal on which the new partnership was struck, agreed with just days to spare, finally signed, as you know, last night. And while the streets of Dover are eerily quiet tonight, as lorry drivers stay away, it is there that the immediate impact is likely to be felt in the coming days. We will, of course, be charting that throughout the days and weeks to come.